I rearranged my kitchen drawers again last night. Silverware first, then the junk drawer, then the cabinet under the microwave where we keep the reusable bags. Nothing was out of place. I'd organized everything on Sunday and nothing had moved since then, because Dev and I live alone and Dev doesn't touch the kitchen drawers if he can avoid it. But standing there at 1 in the morning, sorting takeout menus into a pattern I couldn't explain if you paid me, it felt necessary. It felt like the most important thing I had ever done. Dev found me around 2. He leaned in the doorframe in his boxers and watched for what must have been a full minute before I registered he was there. He didn't say anything. He looked at my hands, then at the drawer, then at my hands again, and I could see him running the calculation, the same one he's been running since we got back from Blackwood. Whether saying something would help. Whether it would just make me aware of one more thing I can't stop doing. He chose quiet. He went back to bed. I kept sorting until the menus were fanned out by cuisine type, then by distance from our apartment, then by a third criterion I couldn't name but recognized as correct the moment I saw it. I'm writing this because I'm driving back to Blackwood on Thursday, and I need somebody to have the full version in case the trip doesn't go the way I'm expecting. Not because I think something bad will happen. I have a route planned. I have a corrected overlay map, a GPS with fresh batteries, and a satellite phone I rented from RI. I'm going in, I'm fixing every marker on the Upper Ridge Trail and the Haversham Connector, and I'm coming home. 2 days. 41 miles. I've done more on less sleep. That's the plan. It's a good plan. I have a spreadsheet. Let me go back to August. The trip was my idea, which will surprise no one who knows me. I'd been planning it since March, a 3-day backpacking loop through Blackwood National Park with my partner Dev, my oldest friend Sloan, and Sloan's boyfriend Kai. I picked the dates. I filed the backcountry permits. I bought the dehydrated meals in bulk and sorted them into daily ration bags with handwritten labels that included calorie counts and rehydration times. Dev called it aggressively competent. Sloan called it the most Mara thing that has ever Mara'd. Both of them were right. Blackwood isn't one of the famous parks. You won't see it on a postcard. It's about 6 hours northeast of where we live, up in the mountains where the hardwood forest gets dense enough to block GPS signals in the valleys. The trail system is extensive but not glamorous, no dramatic overlooks or Instagram spots, just mile after mile of old-growth beech and maple with a ridgeline trail that runs north-south along the spine of the range. I chose it because it was mid-difficulty, had reliable water sources, and wasn't so popular that we'd be stepping over other hikers the whole time. That last part turned out to be wrong. August is peak season, and when we pulled into the trailhead parking lot on a Friday morning, there were already 30 cars there. So much for solitude, Sloan said, shouldering her pack. Solitude was never the objective, I told her. I had the trip binder out, laminated pages in a 3-ring, because I am who I am, and I was cross-referencing the trailhead kiosk map against my own annotated version. Everything matched. White blazes on the trees for the Ridge Trail, blue for the connectors, cairns above tree lean. Standard stuff. Dev adjusted my pack straps without being asked, the way he does, pulling the hip belt 1 notch tighter because he knows I always set it too loose. You good, he said. Perfect. We signed the register at the trailhead and started up. The first 2 miles were a steady climb through dense canopy on a well-groomed trail. We passed a dozen hikers coming down, day trippers, mostly, with small packs and clean boots. Everyone nodded or said good morning. A woman with a golden retriever told us the ridge was gorgeous and the sunset camps were filling up fast. Standard trail talk. I remember thinking how normal it all was, how the woods smelled like warm dirt and decomposing leaves, how the light came through the canopy in dusty columns, and how I was exactly where my spreadsheet said I should be at 10:15 on a Friday. I noticed the first wrong marker about 3 miles in. It was a cairn, a small stack of flat stones at a junction where a faint social trail split off from the main path. The social trail wasn't on my map. It headed east, down into a drainage that I could hear but not see. The cairn was well built, maybe 8 stones, with the flat pointer rock on top angled clearly toward the social trail instead of the main path. If you were a hiker who didn't have a map and was following markers, you'd go right. "Hold on," I said. I set down my poles and crouched beside it. "What are you doing?" Sloane said from behind me. "This cairn is wrong. It's pointing off trail." I lifted the top stone and turned it so the long axis pointed north, along the ridge trail. Then I straightened the one below it. It took about 10 seconds. When I stood up, the cairn pointed clearly in the correct direction. Kai glanced at it and then at me. Maybe someone just knocked it. It wasn't knocked. It was built that way. The stones were stacked deliberately. Dev looked at the social trail heading into the drainage. Kids, probably. Building cairns for fun. Then they built it in exactly the wrong place. I took a photo of the corrected cairn and made a note in my journal: time, mile marker, original orientation, corrected orientation. I'd report it to the park office on our way out. Nobody said anything else about it. We kept walking. Over the next 2 hours, I counted 4 more markers that seemed off. 2 were cairns at or near junctions, angled the same way, east, into the drainages. 1 was a white blaze on a beech tree that I was almost certain was on the wrong side of the trunk, pointing hikers toward a boulder field instead of the switchback. The 4th was subtler, a small arrow scratched into the bark of a hemlock, not an official marker at all, but made to look like one if you weren't paying attention. It pointed down. I fixed the cairns. I couldn't do anything about the blaze or the scratch. I documented them all. Dev watched me kneel beside the second cairn and said, gently, "Babe, we're falling behind schedule." I looked up at him and almost said something sharp, then didn't. He was right. I was 20 minutes behind my itinerary, which in real terms meant nothing. We had plenty of daylight, but in Mara terms meant the spreadsheet was already wrong, which meant everything downstream was wrong, which meant I needed to recalculate. I took a breath and stood up and said, "You're right, let's move." We reached our first campsite at 4:30, half an hour behind plan. Site 14, tucked into a hemlock grove near a creek crossing. There was another group already set up at Site 13, about 100 yards south, a family of 4, parents and 2 teenagers. The dad waved when he saw us. We waved back. Normal. I set up the tent while Dev filtered water and Sloane and Kai gathered wood for a fire we technically didn't need but wanted anyway. The evening was warm and long. We ate rehydrated pasta and drank the whiskey Kai had smuggled in his bear canister. Sloane did an impression of me reviewing restaurant menus that made Dev laugh so hard he choked on his drink. I laughed too. She wasn't wrong. After dark, the dad from Site 13 wandered over. His name was Glenn. He was friendly in the way dads on vacation are, a little too eager to talk to other adults after 3 days with teenagers. He told us he and his family had been in the park since Monday, doing an out and back on the Southern Ridge Trail. "How's the trail been?" I asked. Glenn shrugged. "Beautiful. We had some trouble with the markers down near Haversham, though. Couple of the cairns seemed turned around." I sat up straighter. "Turned around how?" "Just pointed the wrong way. My daughter almost took us down a wrong trail. I had to pull up the All Trails track to get us back." "Did you fix them?" Glenn looked at me like I'd asked him to recite the Constitution. "The cairns?" "No. Figured the park people would get to it." I wanted to press him, which cairns, which junction, which direction were they pointing, but Sloane caught my eye and gave me the look she gives me when I'm about to turn a conversation into an interrogation. I let it go. That night I lay in the tent listening to Dev breathe and thinking about the markers. 5 wrong markers in 8 miles. Maybe 6, if Glenn's were different from mine. It was probably nothing. Animals knock cairns over, people build them where they shouldn't, weather peels blazes off trees. But the consistency bothered me. They all pointed the same direction. East. Downhill. Into the drainages. Day 2 started well and got worse. We broke camp at 7, ahead of schedule, which put me in a good mood. The first 3 miles were straightforward, a gradual climb along the ridge with good sight lines and clear blazes. We passed a couple of early morning hikers and a trail runner who looked like she'd been out since dawn. I checked every marker we passed. All correct. Then we hit the junction with the Haversham connector. The Haversham is a blue blaze trail that cuts east from the ridge down to a forest road, where day hikers can park and do a short loop. On my map, the junction was clearly marked, the ridge trail continues north, the Haversham drops east. There should have been a signpost. There was a signpost. But it was on the ground, face down in the leaf litter. In its place, someone had built a large, careful cairn pointing northeast, not along either official trail, but toward a gap between them where I could see a faint footpath leading down into heavy timber. "This is wrong," I said. Sloane sighed. "Here we go. I'm serious. The sign is on the ground. Someone knocked it down and built this cairn to replace it, and it's pointing the wrong way." Dev picked up the fallen sign. One of its 2 metal mounting bolts was missing. The other was loose. Could have come down on its own. These posts rot. And the cairn just appeared by coincidence. Maybe somebody built it before the sign fell. Or after. Just trying to help. It's pointing into the woods, Dev. There's no trail that direction. Kai was standing slightly apart from us, looking at his phone. "My GPS says the ridge trail is that way." He pointed north, the way I'd been saying. "But my All Trails map shows a trail going northeast." I looked at his screen. He was right, there was a dotted line on all trails heading northeast from this junction, labeled Glass Creek Trail. I pulled out my paper map. No Glass Creek Trail. I pulled up the park's official trail list on my phone, no signal, but I downloaded it, no Glass Creek Trail. "It's a user-submitted track," I said. "Somebody hiked that route and uploaded it. That doesn't make it a trail." Sloane had already started northeast. "There's flagging tape on the trees." She was right about that. Pink surveyor's tape, tied at eye height on trunks about 30 feet apart, leading into the timber. It looked official. It wasn't. Sloane. That is not a maintained trail. I don't care if there's tape. She turned around. "Then where do we go?" "Your sign is on the ground. North. The ridge trail goes north." "I have a compass, I have a map, and I'm telling you the trail goes north. You've been telling us what to do since we left the parking lot." The silence after that had a specific weight to it. Dev looked at the ground. Kai looked at his phone. I looked at Sloane and thought about 8 different things to say and chose the worst one. "Yeah, because I'm the one who planned this trip." "You're welcome." Sloane stared at me for 3 long seconds, then shouldered her pack and walked north without a word. She didn't talk to me for 2 hours. We followed the ridge trail north. I was right about the direction. But the trail was harder to follow here, the blazes were spaced farther apart, and twice we had to backtrack when the path petered out in rhododendron thickets. At one point we crossed a creek that wasn't on my map, which meant either the map was wrong or we were somewhere the map didn't cover. I chose to believe the map was wrong. While we were refilling water at the creek, I rebuilt 3 cairns on the far bank. All 3 had been pointing east, into a drainage choked with fallen hemlock. I turned them north. It took 5 minutes per cairn. I was meticulous. I used my compass to align the pointer stones. "You know other people fix those too, right?" Dev said. Not unkindly. "Whoever's been fixing them has been fixing them wrong." We met Ray around 2 in the afternoon. He was sitting on a rock beside the trail, eating peanut butter straight from the jar with a stick he'd whittled into a flat spatula. Mid-50s, thin, deeply tanned, wearing trail shoes that had been good ones about 300 miles ago. His pack was filthy. He looked up when we approached and smiled like we were old friends. "Northbound," he said. "Yeah. You?" "Southbound. Mostly." He scraped peanut butter off the stick with his teeth. "I've been out for a bit. 9 days? 10. I lose track." I looked at his pack. It was an ultralight model, maybe 40 liters. You could fit 4 days of food in there if you packed tight. 10 days with that pack. I resupply at the creek crossings. There's caches. There are no food caches on the Blackwood Trail system. I knew this because I had researched it exhaustively. "Which creek crossings?" I asked. Ray waved vaguely south. "The one below the Haversham Junction. And there's one near the big drainage, if you go down far enough." He paused, screwing the lid back on his peanut butter. "You folks coming up from the South Connector? From the main trailhead?" "Ah. Different way in." He nodded like this explained something. "The markers are better from that side. I've been fixing them where I can, but they keep getting turned around." I felt something click in my chest. "You've been fixing the markers?" "Sure. Every time I pass a wrong one, I set it right. It's like a public service." He grinned. "Which direction do you correct them to?" "East, mostly. Toward the creek drainages. That's where the trail goes." I stared at him. "The Ridge Trail runs north-south." "The Ridge Trail, sure. But the real trails, the ones that go somewhere, those run east." He said this with absolute confidence. Not defensive. Not confused. Just certain, the way you'd be certain that water runs downhill. Dev touched my elbow, which is our signal for, "Let's keep moving." I ignored it. "Ray, there are no official trails running east from the ridge. I have the complete park map." Ray looked at me with genuine sympathy. "Maps don't always get it right," he said. "I've been out here long enough to know that. The trails move. Trails don't move. These ones do. Not fast. But if you pay attention to the markers, you can see it." He stood up, shouldered his pack. He moved easily for someone who'd supposedly been in the backcountry for 10 days. "Nice meeting you folks. Stay on the blazes." He walked south and disappeared around a bend in the trail. Nobody said anything for a minute. Then Sloane, breaking her silence with me, said, "That guy's been out here too long." "His corrections point east," I said. "He's the one turning the cairns." "Or he's one of them," Dev said. "Could be lots of people fixing markers different directions. Everybody thinks they're right." The thought unsettled me more than it should have. I rebuilt 2 more cairns before we left the creek and didn't say anything about it to anyone. Late on the second afternoon, the trail opened up. We hit the main junction with the north-south connector around 4, and it was like stepping out of a bad dream into a travel brochure. Wide trail, freshly graveled. A real signpost, solidly mounted, with distances and trail names on a brown plastic panel. A hiker register in a metal box. There were boot prints everywhere. This section got heavy traffic from the northern trailhead, which was only 3 miles out. A park ranger on horseback passed us going south. She was young, friendly, had a radio on her hip and a calm bay gelding that sniffed at Dev's pack. "You folks camping at Site 22, she asked. "That's the plan," I said. "Beautiful spot. The creek's running well. Just be aware we've had some reports of markers being tampered with on the Upper Ridge Trail." She said this casually, the way you'd mention a wasp nest or a muddy section. "Routine. I noticed that," I said. "I've been correcting them as I go." She gave me a polite, slightly stiff smile. We appreciate the intent, but we'd actually prefer hikers leave the markers as they find them and report issues to the visitor center. We've got a volunteer crew that handles trail maintenance. When everybody adjusts things independently, it can make the problem worse. I felt my face get hot. I have the official map. I was correcting them to match the map. I understand. Just, let us handle it, okay? She tipped her hat and rode on. Dev wisely didn't say anything. Sloane didn't need to, the look on her face said enough. We reached Site 22 by 5. It was beautiful, a flat clearing in mature beech forest with a fire ring, a bare pole, and a creek 20 yards away that sounded like something from a meditation app. 2 other groups were camped nearby, a young couple and a trio of women about our age doing a section hike. Everyone was friendly. There was weak cell signal if you stood on a rock behind the bare pole and held your phone at the right angle. I sent my mom a photo of the sunset and checked my email and felt, for the first time since the Haversham Junction, like everything was fine. It was fine. We had a good dinner. Dev and Kai built a fire. Sloane and I didn't exactly make up, but we sat on the same log and shared the whiskey, and she told a story about a work disaster that made us all cry laughing. The stars came out thick and clean. I remember lying in the tent that night thinking, this is what I planned. This is why I made all those spreadsheets and labeled all those bags and got up at 5 to drive 6 hours. For this. Everything was fine. I want to be clear about that because of what happened the next morning. Everything was normal and good and fine, and I fell asleep feeling like myself, feeling in control, feeling like a person who knew exactly where she was. Kai woke Dev at 5:30. I know this because Dev's watch alarm didn't go off. I'd set it for 6, and when I crawled out of the tent at 5:45, Dev was standing with Kai near the fire ring and they both went quiet when they saw me. Morning, I said. Why are you up early? Dev looked at Kai. Kai looked at the ground. Then he took out his phone and turned the screen toward me. It was a photo. The light in it was gray and blue, pre-dawn. It showed the edge of our campsite, I could see the corner of our tent in the background, and the bare pole, and the faint white line of the trail leading south. In the foreground, at the junction where a small cairn marked the turnoff to Site 22, there was a person. Me. Standing at the cairn. My back was to the camera. I was wearing the long-sleeve shirt I'd slept in and my camp sandals. My hands were on the cairn, both hands, adjusting the stones with precise, careful movements. The pointer stone was mid-rotation. Even in the photo I could tell I was turning it east. My posture was wrong. Not wrong like I was injured. Wrong like I was very focused on something that required my complete attention, and nothing else in the world existed. My shoulders were perfectly level. My head was tilted slightly forward. I looked like a technician calibrating an instrument. I woke up to use the bathroom, Kai said quietly. You were already out here. I watched you for about 2 minutes. You didn't blink the whole time. I looked at the photo. I looked at my hands. There was grit under my fingernails and a scrape on my right palm that I hadn't noticed until that moment. I didn't do that, I said. Kai said nothing. I don't remember doing that. I was asleep. Dev's voice was careful, the voice he uses when he's trying not to set me off. Mara, it's okay. You were probably sleepwalking. I don't sleepwalk. I've never sleepwalked in my life. There's a first time for. Show me the cairn. We walked to the junction. The cairn was different from how it had looked last night. The pointer stone was angled east-northeast, into the drainage below the campsite. 2 of the support stones had been repositioned to brace it at this new angle. The work was careful. Deliberate. Better than any cairn I'd built while awake. I stood there looking at it with my arms wrapped around myself, and I felt something I don't feel often, which is the complete absence of a plan. Sloane came out of her tent a few minutes later and knew immediately something was wrong. Kai showed her the photo. She looked at it for a long time, then looked at me, and I watched her face go through several things before landing on something I hadn't expected: fear. Not of me. For me. How long has this been happening? She asked. It hasn't. This is the first time. That you know of. She was right, and I didn't have an answer for it. We broke camp in near silence. The plan, my plan, the one on the spreadsheet, called for us to hike north along the connector to the Ridge Trail junction, then follow the Ridge Trail 3 miles north to the parking area at the Blackwood North Trailhead, where I'd arranged a shuttle back to our car. It was a straightforward day, mostly downhill. At the Ridge Trail junction, Sloane stopped. I want to follow the markers, she said. We are following the markers. I want to follow them without you correcting them first. The silence again. That specific wait. You think I'm the one making them wrong, I said. I don't know what I think. But we've been watching you rebuild every cairn we pass for 2 days, and now there's a photo of you doing it in your sleep, and I think maybe the safest thing is to split up and see which set of markers actually gets us out. The logic was cruel and clean. I couldn't argue with it because it was exactly what I would have proposed if our positions were reversed. Fine. We split at the junction. Sloane and Kai would follow the markers as they found them, no corrections. Dev and I would follow my corrected route, the GPS track I'd loaded before the trip, which matched the paper map, which matched the official park data. Both routes should reach the northern trailhead within 3 hours. Dev and I walked in silence for the first mile. I was furious and frightened and moving fast, the way I do when I need to feel like I'm getting somewhere. Dev kept pace without complaining. After the first mile, the trail entered a corridor of dense beech and the blazes got harder to spot. I was checking my GPS every few minutes, matching our position to the track. We were on course. The blazes, where I could see them, agreed. Then I saw a cairn at a creek crossing and stopped. It was pointing east. That's wrong, I said, already moving toward it. Dev caught my arm. Not hard. Just enough. Don't, he said. It's pointing the wrong way. I know. Leave it. I looked at him. His face was doing the calculation again, the one from the kitchen at 2 in the morning. But this time he wasn't staying quiet. I've been watching you, he said. Since the junction. Every cairn we've passed, your hand moves toward it. You don't look at it. You don't stop walking. Your right hand just drifts out, and if I wasn't watching, I wouldn't even notice. You've nudged 3 of them since we split from Sloane. I looked at my right hand. It was at my side. Clean. There's dirt on your fingers, Mara. There was dirt on my fingers. I stood at that creek crossing and felt the ground shift under me in a way that had nothing to do with the terrain. Everything I'd been doing for 2 days, every cairn I'd rebuilt, every pointer stone I'd turned, every patient, meticulous correction, I had been so certain. I had the map. I had the compass. I had the official data. I was right, and the markers were wrong, and I was fixing them. But Kai's photo showed me turning a cairn east. The ranger said independent corrections made things worse. Ray had been correcting markers for 10 days and his corrections pointed in the opposite direction from mine. Or did they? He said east. I said north. But if my corrections were wrong, if my hands were doing something different from what I thought they were doing. How many did I touch? I asked Dev. 3 since the junction. That I saw. Which direction? He didn't answer right away. Then, I don't know. I wasn't checking the direction. I was watching your hand. We stood there. The creek made its sound. The trees made their sound. Everything was green and alive and exactly like a national park in August should be, and I was afraid of my own hands. We need to get out, I said. We followed the GPS. I put my hands in my jacket pockets and kept them there. When the trail was ambiguous, Dev made the calls. I didn't touch anything. We moved fast, almost jogging on the downhill sections, and within 2 hours we broke out of the treeline onto a gravel fire road. It was the wrong trailhead. We were at Blackwood West, the access point for the lower elevation loops on the park's far side. Our car was at Blackwood South, 22 miles by road. We'd been heading northwest when I was certain, when the GPS said, we were heading north. I pulled out the GPS and looked at our track. The blue line on the screen showed a clean, sensible northward path from the junction to the northern trailhead. Our actual position, the red, was 17 miles west of that line. It was as though the GPS had been showing us one path while we walked another. I don't have an explanation for that. The unit was 6 months old. I tested it in the parking lot before we started. It worked fine. I called Sloane from the trailhead payphone. "We're out," she said. She sounded tired but fine. "North Trailhead. Kai and I got here an hour ago." "Where are you?" "West Trailhead." A pause. "How?" "I don't know." Another pause. "Are you okay?" "Yeah." "Can you bring the car around?" It took Sloane and Kai 90 minutes to drive from the north trailhead to our position. We loaded our packs in silence, drove back to Blackwood South to pick up my car, and caravaned home. The 6-hour drive took 7 because of construction. Nobody talked about the trail. Nobody talked about the cairn at the campsite or Kai's photo or the fact that Sloane and Kai had followed the uncorrected markers and arrived exactly where they were supposed to, and Dev and I had followed my corrections and ended up on the wrong side of the park. I didn't touch the radio dial the entire drive. I sat in the passenger seat with my hands in my lap and stared at the highway and tried very hard not to think about the fact that my hands wanted to reach forward and adjust the angle of the rearview mirror by about 2 degrees. For 2 weeks after we got home, everything was mostly normal. Dev and I didn't talk about Blackwood. Sloane called once, asked how I was, told me Kai had deleted the photo from his phone because he thought it was too weird to keep. I thanked him through Sloane and meant it. I went back to work. I designed user interfaces and built wireframes and sat in meetings and was exactly the person I had always been, with one exception: I started noticing my hands. Not all the time. Not even most of the time. But several times a day, I'd catch my right hand doing something I hadn't asked it to do. Moving a coworker's pen cup a half-inch to the left. Straightening the angle of a monitor on an empty desk. Adjusting the gap between books on a shelf in the break room. Small movements. Precise. The kind of thing you wouldn't notice someone doing unless you were specifically watching, and you certainly wouldn't notice yourself doing unless you were specifically afraid you might be. I started watching. In 1 week, I cataloged 31 adjustments I made to objects in my environment without conscious intent. Pen cups. Picture frames. Shoes by the front door. The soap dispenser in the bathroom. Each adjustment was small: an inch, a rotation, a realignment. None of them seemed to follow a pattern. None of them seemed to mean anything. Then I bought a compass. I measured the direction of every adjustment I made over the course of 3 days, and something fell into place with a click I felt in my teeth. Every adjustment moved the object east-northeast. Every single one. The pen cup went left because left was east from where it sat on the desk. The shoes by the door rotated to point toward the front of the building, which faced east-northeast. The soap dispenser, the picture frames, the books, all shifted the same direction. I put the compass away and sat in my car in the parking garage for 40 minutes. That night I opened my laptop and searched for Blackwood Trail maintenance. I wasn't looking for old stories or historical incidents or any kind of origin myth. I was looking for other people who'd had the same experience. What I found was a volunteer trail maintenance forum, a message board run by a regional hiking club that sent crews into Blackwood 4 times a year to clear blowdowns, repaint blazes, and rebuild cairns. The thread I found was titled Ridge Trail Markers, Ongoing Issues, and it was 3 years old with over 200 replies. The first post was from a crew leader named Donna Kay, who reported that during their spring maintenance trip, they'd found roughly 30% of the cairns on the Upper Ridge Trail pointing off trail. She'd corrected them all and documented the corrections. 6 weeks later, another crew went in and found them wrong again, not just reverted, but rebuilt in new positions, pointing in new directions. All east. All toward the interior drainages. The thread evolved over 3 years from mildly annoyed to deeply unsettled. Crew after crew went in, corrected the markers, and found them wrong within weeks. Some crews installed trail cameras. The cameras showed hikers stopping at cairns, adjusting them, and moving on. Different hikers. No coordination. No obvious pattern except the direction, east-northeast, into the drainages, toward the center of the park. One poster, a GIS analyst named Mwander, had mapped every reported wrong marker over the full 3 years. He'd posted the map. I stared at it for a long time. Every marker pointed toward the same place, a nameless drainage basin in the east-central interior of the park, about 4 miles off the nearest maintained trail. On the topo map, it was just a low point between 2 ridges. No features. No trails. No reason for anyone to go there. Every wrong marker in 3 years was an arrow pointing at that basin. I scrolled to the most recent posts. In the last year, 5 different people had posted that they were going back into Blackwood to do independent marker corrections. They were experienced hikers, competent navigators. They posted detailed plans, routes, timelines, GPS waypoints. They were going to fix the markers once and for all. 3 of them posted updates from the trail. Detailed logs. Corrections made, GPS coordinates, before and after photos. Normal, methodical work. The kind of thing I would do. None of them posted after returning. Not one follow-up. Not one mission accomplished. Their accounts were still active. One of them had logged into the forum as recently as last month, but they never posted about their Blackwood trips again. When other users asked how it went, they didn't respond. I closed my laptop. Then I opened my trail journal from the Blackwood trip and flipped to the last pages. I'd been keeping notes throughout, mile markers, timestamps, cairn corrections. Normal stuff, in my normal handwriting, the tight, angular print I've used since college. The last 4 pages were different. I hadn't written in the journal after we left the park. I was certain of that. I remembered putting it in my pack at camp on the morning of day 3 and not touching it again until I unpacked at home and tossed it on my desk. But the last 4 pages were full. Dense, precise directions in my handwriting. I checked it against the earlier pages. It was mine, describing a route I had never taken. It started at the Blackwood West trailhead, where Dev and I had ended up. It followed the fire road east for 1.4 miles, then turned onto an unmarked footpath at a double-trunked oak. It described creek crossings, boulder fields, specific trees with specific markings. It gave distances to the 10th of a mile. It described the approach to a drainage basin from the southwest, through a stand of old-growth hemlock, along the north bank of a creek that forked twice. The directions ended mid-sentence at the bottom of the last page, as though I'd been interrupted. Or as though I'd run out of paper. I don't remember writing any of it. But the handwriting was mine, and the detail was extraordinary, better than my actual trail notes, which I'd written while conscious and paying attention. These directions were the work of someone who knew exactly where she was going. Dev found me in the kitchen at 3 a.m. that night. I was standing at the counter with the contents of the spice cabinet spread out in front of me. I'd arranged them in a grid. 12 jars, 4 rows of 3. From above, I know this because Dev took a picture. The grid made a shape. A drainage pattern. Ridgelines and valleys, formed by the gaps between the jars, flowing east-northeast. "Come to bed," Dev said. "I know where it is," I said. Where what is? I didn't answer, because I didn't know what I meant. But I do now. I've spent the last 2 weeks preparing. I have the volunteer forums correction data loaded into my GPS as waypoints. I have the topo map with the drainage basin marked. I have my trail journal with the handwritten route, which I have transferred to a clean map with proper annotations and distance markers. I have food for 3 days, a water filter, a first aid kit, a satellite phone, and a detailed itinerary that I've emailed to Sloan with instructions to call search and rescue if I don't check in by Sunday evening. I am going back to Blackwood to correct the markers. All of them. Properly. With the right data and the right tools and a clear head. I am going to follow the ridge trail south from the north trailhead, correct every cairn on the upper trail, then hike the Haversham connector east and correct those markers too. If the volunteer data is right, and I believe it is, the corrections should hold if they're done systematically, by someone who understands the trail network and has an accurate map. That's the plan. But here is the part one need to be honest about, because if I'm not honest in this document, there's no point in writing it. There is a third map on my kitchen table. Not the official park topo. Not the volunteer correction overlay. A third map, hand-drawn on graph paper, showing a route from the Blackwood West trailhead to the drainage basin. It is the most detailed map I have ever made. Every contour line is precise. Every creek crossing is labeled with a width estimate and a substrate description: gravel, cobble, bedrock. Every trail junction, including junctions that don't exist on any official map, is marked with a small arrow indicating the correct direction of travel. The arrows all point east-northeast. I made this map. I recognize my handwriting. I recognize my drafting style, the way I label contour intervals, the way I mark north with a small diamond instead of an arrow. I made it over the last 2 weeks, in the evenings, sitting at the kitchen table after Dev went to bed. I don't remember making it, but I can see the progression: light pencil first, then ink, then colored pencil for the water features. Days of careful work. It is, without question, the best map I have ever drawn. The route it describes is clean, direct, and elegant. It avoids the steep drainages and follows the natural contours of the terrain with the efficiency of a path that has been walked many times by someone who knows exactly where they're going. Looking at it, I feel a deep, physical certainty that this route is correct. Not just accurate, correct. Right. The way a thing is right when it's exactly where it belongs. I should throw it away. I know that. I should burn it and cancel the trip and see a neurologist and tell Dev about the spice jars. Instead, I folded it and put it in the left pocket of my hiking vest, where I keep the maps I actually intend to use. Dev asked me this morning if he could come. I said no. I told him it's a solo correction run, that I'll move faster alone, that I need to do this by myself to prove I can trust my own navigation again. He did the calculation. He stayed quiet. Sloan called tonight. She told me not to go. She said it in the voice she uses when she knows I've already decided and she's saying it anyway so she can live with herself later. I told her I'd be fine. I told her I had a plan. I do have a plan. I have 3 plans, if I'm counting honestly. The official correction route. The volunteer overlay. And the hand-drawn map in my left pocket that will take me to a nameless drainage basin in the deep interior of a park where something makes people rearrange the things that keep other people safe, and I can't tell if I'm going to fix it or if I'm just another pair of hands doing the work that the place requires. I leave tomorrow. I've checked the route 3 times. I know exactly where I'm going.